From Troy Public Radio, this is Alabama Aloud. I'm Don Noble. Alabama Aloud is the only podcast where you can hear Alabama stories read in their entirety. Today, I'll be reading Robert Earl and W.C. by Philip Shirley. Philip Shirley was raised and educated in Alabama, but spent much of his life in Mississippi in the PR game. Now he has returned. Shirley is the author of over 100 published pieces, including 2 novels, The White Lie and The Graceland Conspiracy. Robert Earl and W.C. are 2 good old boys, drunk, reckless, and luckless, well known to us all. The story, Robert Earl and W.C., was published in the 2008 collection, Oh, Don't You Cry for Me, and is read here by permission of the author. Robert Earl turned the Coca-Cola bottle up to drain the last few swallows of Jim Beam bourbon and Coke. He and his brother W.C. had been passing the bottle back and forth on the drive home from fishing the spillway of the Claiborne Lock and Dam. Behind the 2 men, a red ice chest with duct tape holding a cracked lid together, half full of channel catfish, slid from side to side of the truck bed whenever the road curved. Half a dozen Zebco 33 reels and rods dangled over the tailgate. Hooks and weights tangled in the wind and knotted around the rod tips. W.C. took one hand off the steering wheel and reached toward Robert Earl. "Hey, save me a swallow," he said, realizing his request was too late even as he said it. W.C. aimed the truck tires at a pothole, which jarred the bottle between Robert Earl's lips and caused drops of brown liquid to dribble down both sides of his mouth. "Damn it, W.C., can't you drive no better than that?" W.C. didn't look over, forcing himself not to laugh. "I ain't the one made the roads." "And you ain't the one paying no attention, neither." Robert Earl tossed the bottle onto the seat next to a brown paper sack holding the empty pint bottle. The cab of the new Dodge Ram truck grew quiet. Only the whir of the air conditioner's fan on high filled the void of sound. The brothers were comfortable with silence after logging hundreds of trips and thousands of miles in their work ferrying cars from Monroeville's big car dealer. Even as kids, they didn't feel every moment required conversation. They might sit side by side, holding cane poles for an hour without speaking at a small pond near their house on the edge of town. 2 minutes later, Robert Earl picked up the Coke bottle and pushed the button to lower the passenger window. "Watch this," he said, as he leaned halfway out the window and cocked his arm, holding the green glass bottle high over his head. W.C. glanced over at Robert Earl, whose thin, gray-blonde hair was pinned back by the wind. Seeing the highway sign indicating a crossroad ahead, W.C. knew the routine. He glanced down and saw the needle just past 80. He steered near the side of the road and slowed to 50. "This is a nice ride. I might get me one of these if old Foster wasn't so damn proud of 'em." W.C. watched as Robert Earl timed his release and flung the bottle forward toward the sign. The expected explosion of glass never came. The unbroken bottle ricocheted off the left edge of the yellow and black sign into the middle of the truck's windshield. The bottle shot through a hole in the center of a spidering pattern of cracks, glanced off the side of W.C.'s face, and smashed into the back window with a loud crack. A hailstorm of glass pelted the inside of the cab, and the wind whistled like a jet engine through the hole in the windshield. W.C. swerved the truck left and jammed his boot down on the brakes with his eyes closed. The tires locked as the truck crossed both lanes and came to rest in the ditch on the other side in a cloud of black smoke. "Damn son of a..." W.C. yelled as he turned off the ignition. As a cloud of fine July dust drifted in front of the truck, W.C. looked over at Robert Earl and saw from his look that he was also uncertain what to do next. W.C. heard catfish flopping around in the back of the truck from the overturned ice chest. He brushed tiny pieces of glass from his hair and off the front of his blue work shirt. "Man, you could have got us killed or something, and that glass has cut me," W.C. said, realizing blood was running down the side of his face, wetting his collar. "Damn you, Robert Earl." "Well, we done it 1,000 times, and that never happened before. It weren't my fault." "What are we going to tell Mr. Foster now? He doesn't even know I kept the extra keys after we delivered the truck yesterday. Look at that hole in the windshield. He's going to fire both our asses. My old lady said she'd kick me out if I come home again without a job, so you'd better get that couch ready." As the shock of the crash wore off, W.C. touched the side of his face. He looked down at his T-shirt and saw the entire right side was turning red. "Good Lord, I must have got a deep cut. And it's getting all over the damn seat. How bad's it look?" "It's burning like all hell." Robert Earl looked up at W.C.'s head and immediately threw up onto the seat between them. "God almighty, Robert Earl, what's wrong with you? Can't you open a door if you've got to puke?" W.C. yelled. He quickly slid away from Robert Earl, trying to keep the bourbon and Coke lunch remains off his pants. He reached up and touched the side of his head. His touch felt like he'd branded himself with a hot poker. "Now look at the side of my face and tell me what it looks like. I know I got a bad cut, so go on. How bad is it?" Robert Earl wiped his mouth on the sleeve of his white T-shirt. He wanted to speak, but could think of no words that seemed appropriate. Instead of saying anything, he reached up to the back of the seat behind W.C. and picked up W.C.'s right ear between his thumb and finger and dangled the warm flesh for his brother to see. When W.C. realized what Robert Earl was holding, he vomited into the stinking puddle on the seat, dripping onto the floorboard. Robert Earl tapped on the window of W.C.'s hospital room. He stood behind an overgrown privet hedge and hoped no one spotted him from the parking lot. Robert Earl saw W.C.'s gray, braided ponytail as he lay on his side with his head turned away. Robert Earl tapped again, and W.C. sat up, rubbing his eyes, and looked at the door. W.C. still had the bandages wrapped around and around his head like a mummy, with a big mound of gauze over the ear that had been sewn back on. Robert Earl was proud he'd thought to stick the ear in a McDonald's cup and cover it with ice that had spilled into the back of the truck when the fish cooler turned over. "W.C., let me in," Robert Earl half whispered, half yelled, through the closed window. "I brought whiskey." W.C. slowly put his feet over the side of the bed and stood up. His butt, white as paste and a perfect contrast to his back that had turned caramel-colored from fishing shirtless for the past half a century, showed through the hospital gown that didn't quite go all the way round. He shuffled to the doorway and looked both directions down the hall before shutting the heavy door and walking over to open the window. Robert Earl held out his hand, but W.C. simply reached through the window and took the grocery sack from his brother with the fifth of Jim Beam and the 2 short Cokes, then walked back to the bed and sat down to open the bottle, ignoring the chaser. Robert Earl mumbled, "Damn," then pulled himself up with both hands and hooked a leg over the metal sill, gasping as he clung there with the heel of one thick-soled black shoe keeping him from falling back to the ground. He wasn't sure how to swing himself on up and inside the room, so he just hung there with his skinny, almost hairless white leg sticking out from his pants. "Don't worry yourself none about me, W.C. You got a fine way of saying thank you." Straining and inching himself up, Robert Earl finally managed to fall through the opening. He sat on the floor, huffing from the effort. "Like I said, I can climb in all by myself. I climbed my first tree over 60 years ago and didn't get your help then either, big brother." W.C. poured 3 fingers of whiskey into a plastic cup, mulling what Robert Earl had said. He sipped the bourbon. "Well, at least this time you won't go running to Mama with a broken arm and getting my backside tanned for not watching out." "You don't look like you need none of that," Robert Earl said, now reclining against the wall heater. He ignored his brother's dig. "I saw how you hobbled over to the door. What kind of pain pills they got you on?" "They ain't worth a damn. I had Meprogan the first 3 days. But now I just got those lower tabs. You have to take 2 or 3 of the damn things just to get a buzz, so I have to hold them in my mouth till the nurse leaves, and wait till I get 3 saved up. But this whiskey will help." "Well, just give me 2 then," Robert Earl said. He thought he shouldn't be greedy, since W.C. was the one who had his ear sewed back on. "Give you 2? Do I look like a damn doctor? I brought the whiskey. Now give me 1 at least." W.C. reached over for the Gideon's King James Bible sitting on his bedside and flipped it open. He found a pill in the middle of the book of Revelations and tossed it to Robert Earl. Robert Earl pushed himself up, walked to the bathroom, found a plastic cup, and poured himself a half a glass of whiskey. "When I come out of the Piggly Wiggly buying a carton of smokes and a few groceries this morning, I saw old man Foster in that new truck we delivered. He had the windshield fixed. I was parked 2 cars over, so I stuck an Irish potato over his tailpipe after he went inside the pig. I reckon that stopped him when he got a block or 2. You don't think he saw your car? I don't give a damn. He can't prove nothing. And he didn't have any right to fire us like that just for borrowing his damn truck. Nobody needed it on a Sunday." W.C. laughed a little. "He may not have needed it on a Sunday, but I bet he didn't need no hole in the windshield nor puke neither. And you needn't rile him up more, or he won't ever hire us back." "Hell, W.C., think about it. For all we knew, we were telling the truth about them boys throwing the bottle out from a car going the other way. They can't prove nothing just because they found an empty pint in the floorboard. And wrecks can make a lot of people throw up. It don't mean you're drunk." "You're right about that. We wasn't drunk on no pint." Robert Earl tossed the last swallow of whiskey into the back of his throat and said, "It just ain't right to fire us without proving we done anything. We got rights, you know." He picked up the TV remote to signal he'd said his piece, found the Atlanta Braves playing on TBS, and turned the sound down low. A few minutes later, Robert Earl said, "Your old lady dropped off a box at my trailer with your clothes, that old Joe Namath bobblehead doll, and a clock radio. She said that was all she had that was yours, but to call if you thought of something else." W.C. nodded, said nothing. Overhead, the fluorescent light hummed. The 2 men sat there, sipping straight whiskey, watched the baseball game with the sound down, and said nothing, till both fell asleep. W.C. and Robert Earl enjoyed the unseasonably warm autumn afternoon as they rode north on Interstate 65 on the way back from Mobile to Monroeville. They delivered 2 used cars to a wholesaler for Mr. Foster and were returning in a new minivan. The windows were down, and each rested an arm on his door. "How long you think we've been ferrying cars to Mobile and back for old man Foster's dealership?" Robert Earl asked W.C., who had insisted on driving that day. W.C. thought about it, ran his hand through his long hair, and hooked a loose strand behind his ears. "I don't know, 8 or 10 years?" W.C. reached to turn down the country music station that had been blaring over the commotion of wind. 10 years last month," Robert Earl said, as he slapped his thigh. "I just figured it out. Started right out after I retired early from the mill. And that was 10 years ago. I'll be damned. We need to celebrate. Not many brothers get to work together for 10 years. Hell, you never even stayed married that long." W.C. scratched his chin. "Well, at least I had 3 women who would say yes, and 2 more that would have if they'd been able to get an outright divorce. That's a hell of a lot better than you did with just 1 wife, and a foreigner at that." "She wasn't no foreigner. She was Puerto Rican, and that's really just like a state. And don't be speaking ill of the dead, no way," Robert Earl said, thinking of the wife he always spoke of as dead, although in fact he knew she was living in Chicago after running away with a long-haul trucker. "Look, there's a chevron at this first Atmore exit that has a package store on the side of it. Pull off here and I'll get us a pint." Robert Earl raised his hip and dug out his wallet. He opened it to pull out a bill and waved the money in front of W.C. "I got a 10. I'll buy. Come on. Just a celebration sip." "I don't think Foster would like it if he found us drinking on another delivery. He said no more chances. I think he means it this time." The memory of last time he and Robert Earl had been drinking and driving made him reach up to touch his ear. The soreness was a little better, he thought. He glanced in the mirror and saw the skin was still bright pink, shifting to deep purple in the stitching that circled the ear like a tiny railroad bed. As the exit was nearing, Robert Earl took one last shot. "It's just a pint. That ain't going to hurt nothing. 10 years we've been shuttling damn cars back and forth for Foster. 10 years. And what you got to show for it? At least we can have a drink, for heaven's sake, to take the edge off this lonesome road." W.C. turned away from his brother, looking across the interstate to a wide pasture. Round hay bales cast long shadows across the freshly cut field. The smell of the drying hay filled the car with its toasty aroma, reminding W.C. of fall and college football on the radio and his childhood roaming the rolling hills around Monroeville with his younger brother in tow. The cedar trees along the fence rows stood still in the windless afternoon. He looked back at his brother for several seconds, then eased back on the accelerator and steered the truck down the exit toward the Chevron station. The story, Robert Earl and W.C., was published in the 2008 collection, Oh, Don't You Cry for Me, and is read here by permission of the author. We hope you don't keep Alabama Aloud all to yourself. Subscribe to our podcast and share it with a friend. Better yet, write us a review in the iTunes store. It helps other people find the podcast. Also, give us a shout-out on social media. Alabama Aloud is a production of Troy Public Radio and produced by Austin Toy and Kyle Gassett. Special thanks to Matt Clower, Buddy Johnson, and Michelle Mowry. Alabama Aloud is made possible in part by a grant from Alabama State Council on the Arts. So, until next time, when you'll hear more of Alabama Read Aloud, I'm Don Noble. Thanks for listening.